Ready to dive into something fascinating. This time we're exploring the world of personality types, cognitive functions, all that good stuff, and our source material. It's a super interesting conversation between Carlos and Casey, where they try to map Jung's framework onto a system Carlos developed.
Yeah, Quaternion Process Theory, or QTP. They don't just talk theory, though. They really bring in their own experiences to the conversation.
Exactly. It's like Casey's background is in law enforcement.
Hmm.
So for her, reading people, like, really quickly, that's essential in her world.
And then you've got Carlos. He's an architect, so, meticulous about everything. But what I thought was really cool was how Carlos tried to connect each of those Jungian functions to types of inference, like with his QTK model.
So he's basically saying sensing is like induction, so pattern recognition.
Exactly. And then he connects thinking with deduction. So basically logical reasoning, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
But then it gets even more interesting. He goes on to link intuition with abduction. That's how we form hypotheses.
Wow. Okay. And feeling. Where does that fit in?
He connects that to get this empathetic integration, basically aligning with personal values.
Okay, I'm following so far.
And get this. He has this total aha moment when he realizes Jung's function stack isn't just random. The opposing functions are like woven together right next to each other. And that tension, it makes them observable.
I mean, yeah, when you see that contrast, it's easier to see where one function ends and another begins, right?
Exactly. And this whole discussion leads into judging versus perceiving types. It's a biggie.
Huge in the MBTI world, for sure.
Absolutely. And Carlos and Casey, they get into some of the misconceptions about J and P types, like that whole idea that judging types are just rushing to decisions.
Oh, he's in a hurry.
Right. But they're like, hold on, it's not about speed.
Yeah, because you can't really judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. Carlos and Casey, they emphasize it's more about the desire for closure. That's what J's crave. They need that decisiveness.
Whereas perceiving types are like, let's keep our options open.
Adaptability all the way.
Right.
It reminds me of something a judge, no pun intended, once said.
Oh, I love it when there are judges involved. What did she say?
She was like, listen, good judgment. It's not about being fast. It's about, like, really weighing the evidence, taking your time, and then making a well-informed decision.
Which makes sense. It's a thoughtful process, not a race.
Totally. And I think that really gets at the strengths and weaknesses of both J and P types.
Because neither one is inherently better.
Right.
It's all about balance, like with everything else in Jung.
100%. So Carlos and Casey, they were saying those who lean toward judging with that desire for closure, they're often really good decision makers, natural leaders.
Decisive. Especially when you need to think on your feet.
But that need for closure can also be a bit of an Achilles heel, right?
How so?
Well, they can come across as inflexible, maybe even a little aggressive if they don't get that resolution they're looking for.
Makes sense. Hard to change their minds once they've decided, I bet.
Exactly. Perceiving types, total opposite. Adaptable, open-minded, great at seeing different perspectives.
Creative. Always coming up with something new.
For sure. But, of course, there are two sides to every coin.
Yeah, what's the flip side there?
They might have trouble making those firm decisions or, like, sticking to one path,
Which can make them seem like they lack conviction.
Right, exactly. And all this talk about decisiveness versus adaptability, it made me think about introversion versus extroversion.
Oh, for sure. Another big one in Jungian psychology.
And again, it's not that one is better than the other.
It's just how you interact with the world, how you manage your energy.
Right. And Carlos and Casey, they talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each, like extroverts, they're amazing at networking, love social settings.
They're the life of the party, for sure. Engaging, drawing people in.
But all that outward focus can be draining.
For everyone, really.
Totally. And sometimes maybe they come across as a bit overbearing without meaning to.
Or they miss social cues because they're so busy, being on.
Introverts are totally different. Super observant, pick up on things others completely miss.
Fantastic listeners.
They have this calming presence, which is nice, in this crazy world.
Definitely. But that quietness, it can be misunderstood.
Exactly. People might misinterpret their silence.
Because they're not always, putting it all out there.
Yeah, and it's like they have this rich inner world, but not everyone gets to see it.
And that could be a real disadvantage, especially in situations where, like, self-promotion matters.
Exactly. And then, oh my goodness, Carlos really throws us for a loop.
What does he say?
He starts talking about the feeling function, but in a way I'd never thought about it before.
Really? How so?
He's like, it's not just about being emotional. He says it's about making value judgments.
Mm-hmm.
and having like deep empathy.
Okay, interesting.
And then he says there's fast empathetic thinking
Mm-hmm.
and slow empathetic thinking. Yeah, so he was saying that those like immediate reactions we have, the visceral stuff, that's more like sensing.
Okay, I see where he's going with this.
But feeling, he says that's about like taking in information over time and then you arrive at these value judgments. It's way more deliberate.
Huh. That makes you rethink the whole, thinking over feeling thing.
For sure. And this is where Jung's model gets even more, I don't know, intricate.
How so?
So remember how we were talking about judging and perceiving and introversion, extroversion? Well, those preferences actually determine the order of your function.
The function stack, right?
Yeah, your own personal stack, and it's the order that makes all the difference, like even a small change.
Huge impact. It's like that order of operations thing in math.
Totally. And get this, Carlos was saying he sees this validated in, of all things, large language model.
Like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was saying these models, they can describe the effects of different function stacks.
Wild. AI giving us insights into the human mind. But okay, so going back to the fast versus slow feeling, that really got me thinking.
Yeah, it's a subtle thing, but important. And Casey was saying she tends to feel things really quickly. Like she trusts those initial reactions.
Which, in her line of work, probably essential.
Oh, totally. But she also said, it's not like she just goes with her gut all the time. Especially in law enforcement, she's got to be super careful, make sure things are evidence-based.
Right, of course, of course.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting how different that is from Carlos. He's an INTP, right?
Yeah, and he was saying for him, getting to those value judgments, it takes way longer. Like his thinking function kind of hogs the spotlight,
And feeling has to wait its turn.
Exactly. So it just goes to show, even when people have some of the same function types, they can show up so differently.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder about your own experience,
Totally. Like, do your feelings come on fast? Or is it more of a slow burn as you process things?
Yeah, like what does that even feel like?
Right. It really makes you think. And I don't know, it's like we're learning a whole new language, right? To understand personality.
Not just our own, but everyone's.
Totally. It's like that Einstein quote.
Yeah.
The one about the intuitive mind being a sacred gift.
And the rational mind is the servant.
Yes. And it's so true. We often forget about the gift. We're always focused on logic, on reason.
But like Carlos and Casey were saying, if you ignore those other functions, you miss out on so much.
100%. So the question is, how do we tap into that? Even if, say, feeling isn't our dominant function, how do we start to value that?
It's a journey, for sure.
It is. But I think for me, it starts with awareness. Just realizing like, hey, these functions exist within me.
So if you're someone who's like judging, it's not about becoming a perceiving type overnight. It's more maybe noticing when you're shutting down other possibilities because you need that closure.
Exactly. Or if you're more introverted, doesn't mean you have to suddenly become the life of the party. But maybe it's recognizing, hey, I'm really observant and finding ways to share those observations.
Finding that balance, right?
Yes. Honoring what comes naturally, but also maybe stepping outside that comfort zone a little.
Because that's how we grow, right?
Totally. Become more well-rounded, more adaptable, more understanding of like everything and everyone.
And isn't that what Jung was all about? Like integrating those opposites within us.
Yes. Embracing the fact that we can be logical and emotional, introverted and extroverted.
It's in that integration that we really find, our full potential.
I love that. And with Carlos and Casey, what makes their conversation so interesting is that they're not afraid to get personal. Like we hear about how Casey uses her feeling function in law enforcement.
Right. She was saying she often gets these like really quick reads on people.
Which makes sense in her line of work. But she also knows she can't let those feelings cloud her judgment,
And then there's Carlos, Mr. Thinking Dominant.
All about the logic.
But they both see the value in all the functions, even the ones that don't come as naturally.
Absolutely. And that's so important to remember. There's no right way to be, no perfect function stack. It's about understanding your own strengths.
Oh, and this is right.
For sure. And figuring out how to bring it all together.
Because when you have that self-awareness, you can make more conscious choices, about how you approach the world, how you deal with challenges, how you connect with people.
100%. It's about realizing that our differences, they're not bad things. They're what make us who we are. It's all part of the human experience,
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jung, I have to say I'm kind of in awe of how complex, how amazing the human mind is. And this journey of self-discovery, it's never really over, is it?
Never. And that's what makes it so exciting. The more you learn, the more you realize There's so much more to learn. It just keeps going.
So here's a thought now that you've been on this journey with us. What will you do with this new understanding? How will you use it to better understand yourself and the world around you?
Keep exploring. Keep asking questions. It's out there.